People's ignorance of their flaws has led to many disastrous mistakes throughout history. Humans are very prejudiced, overconfident, judgmental, and self-absorbed creatures who are completely unaware of their own limits and faults in comparison to other species. When it comes to understanding why people make mistakes, these traits are significant indicators. The fact that you are totally unaware of the mistakes that you have made puts you in a very disadvantageous position, since you will be unable to learn from your past mistakes. In other words, if you're stuck with something, you learn to live with it. And the sooner you learn to live with it, the happier you will be. Joseph T. Hallinan. It is inevitable that mistakes will be made. The fact that we all make them is a part of what makes us human, after all. The way you react and respond to mistakes reveals a lot about your personality. Many of us are prone to berating ourselves for our mistakes right away, concentrating on our lack of perfectionism as the source of our frustration. Does this, on the other hand, seem like a good or even healthy way to cope with making a mistake? Instead of seeing mistakes to be entirely negative occurrences, consider them to be opportunities. These possibilities ultimately depend on your preferences, but the options are almost infinite. Through the use of well-detailed explanations and a huge number of real-life examples, Joseph T. Hallinan has been able to highlight why people make mistakes, when and how they make them, as well as what they can do to avoid making the same mistakes in the future. If you're interested in learning about the most compelling reasons why people make mistakes, then this is the summary for you. Understanding why others make mistakes gets you one step ahead of the game in avoiding many of them. If you make a mistake, you'll probably blame it on the fact that you're human and that mistakes happen. The reality is that people are prone to making errors. There are many different types of errors, and the truth is that everyone makes them. Human error is responsible for the majority of errors. Mistakes are most often made as a consequence of how the universe has been set up to accommodate certain patterns. People who are right-handed, for example, will almost always turn right when entering a building, even if it isn't the proper path to the door they want. Expectations, in addition to these natural arrangements, have an important influence on you. The information you get and from whom you obtain it have a significant impact on how you perceive events. If you're sipping a glass of wine produced in Italy or France, the wine will immediately taste better on your tongue than if you're enjoying a glass of wine made in Belgium, because wines from Italy or France have been generally accepted to be the best. The problem with systemic biases is that most individuals are unaware that they have them. People believe they are objective when they are not, or that they are observant when they are not. When anything goes wrong, people also prefer to assign blame and point accusing fingers, even though they often misdirect it. We learn so little from experience because we often blame the wrong cause. Joseph T. Hallinan. People are prone to making the same mistakes over and over again. It's extremely typical for people to forget their names and be unaware of important information. Mistakes tend to follow certain patterns, which is why being acquainted with these patterns is crucial to learning from them. Human expectations shape the way we see the world and, often, the way we act in it as well. In an interview, actor Burt Reynolds told the tale of an event that he considers to be his greatest blunder. He'd entered a bar and taken a seat on a bar stool. A loud and obnoxious guy sat farther down the bar. A few minutes later, the guy began to irritate another lady in the pub, which annoyed Reynolds. Reynolds, unable to contain himself any longer, walked up to the guy and struck him in the face, knocking him out and scattering him over the bar. Reynolds realized the guy he had just struck didn't have any legs after he had fallen. Reynolds believed he understood what was going on from his vantage point, but the truth was that he was simply evaluating the scenario based on his own expectations. He assumed the guy had legs but didn't check to see whether he had. This phenomenon is so frequent that it has been given a name by researchers and academics: the "looked but didn't see" error. People, unlike cameras, are unable to record a perfect image of anything. The brain retains data in bits and pieces. People only perceive what they expect to see, the natural arrangement that dictates how a situation should seem. In comparison to a beginner or amateur, an expert will analyze and appraise a situation differently. This is because the expert concentrates on the information at hand for a longer period of time, taking into account situations that an amateur would overlook. People are also blind to anything that challenges their preconceptions. Even with professionals on hand to ensure perfect continuity, errors happen all the time in filmmaking. Did you know? According to research conducted by the Australian Transport Safety Bureau, ATSB, aviation maintenance engineers made on average of 50 observable errors per workshift. People tend to remember faces easier than names because random information is harder to recollect. If you are handed a yearbook of your classmates from 50 years ago, you are more likely to recall their faces than their names. People remember things with significance more readily, which is why it's simpler to forget names and recall faces. You need to associate an emotional detail with a face in order to recall it better. Since you failed to connect an emotional detail to the individual, you will have a tough time identifying a purse snatcher or a pickpocket. People have diverse perspectives on the same circumstances. Another individual who was there at the same time as you will have a different description of the pickpocket than you. The fact that random information is difficult for the brain to remember, people often forget crucial data such as passwords, birthdays, anniversaries, and phone numbers. Your brain stores the information you see, hear, and smell in bits and pieces. When the information stored in your brain is not random like birthdays and passwords, your brain recalls a picture quickly. Mnemonics is the practice of attaching details to something as a reminder, and it goes back to the ancient Greeks. Beautiful faces are more readily recognized than unattractive ones. This is due to the fact that when you see a beautiful face, you pay more attention to the details than when you see an unattractive face. It will be simpler to recognize a robber with a beautiful face than one with an ugly one. Humans make snap judgments about others based on small, hardly detectable cues that influence their decisions. When Princeton University researchers showed photographs of political candidates to participants, the subjects made snap judgments on the candidate's competency and efficiency based simply on their appearance. These calculations are much more accurate than polls in forecasting the result of an election. A politician may be elected purely on the basis of how they portray themselves to the public. This study demonstrates how individuals mistakenly think they are making choices based on normal cognitive processes when they are not. Emotions, biases, preferences, natural selection, and social pressure all influence human decision-making, no matter how large or little. Humans will rather make incorrect choices and take the wrong actions than do nothing at all. They can answer for their errors a lot easier than they can for their inactions. Humans think that inactivity is a huge failure in and of itself and that it is worse than doing something they may regret later. Many individuals are not wired in the manner they believe. When recalling previous events, people typically exaggerate them. They have a tendency to remember their own ideas, words, and deeds in a more positive light than what really occurred. This habit is so widespread and entrenched in humans that most individuals are unaware that they are engaging in it. When a group of researchers questioned a group of students to remember their high school grades, more than 75% claimed to have had higher grades than they really received. This personality characteristic has grown so prevalent that few people identify it as a flaw. The result of an event or circumstance has a significant impact on how people remember it. It is particularly prevalent among academics and historians, who have coined the term hindsight bias to describe it. People often add and subtract information from events in order to achieve a favorable result. People who think they are not wired in a certain manner tend to show more of the characteristics they are rejecting. Tobacco firms may get away with a lot of cases because they think the warning on their goods is sufficient to inform you about the risks of smoking. The reality is that you are not automatically negating the consequences of a prejudice by revealing it. Notifying smokers that they are at risk of dying young does not guarantee that they will not die young. Despite the fact that many physicians deny that pharmaceutical corporations have any influence over their medication prescriptions, according to a report by Washington Post, pharmaceutical companies spend an average of $7,000 per doctor to market their goods. What you seek may influence what you perceive. The image in front of you is what you expect to see since your perception is limited. Despite pilots' extensive training and access to sophisticated technology, you'd be excused for thinking that crashing an aircraft into the ground should be almost impossible. Controlled flight into terrain, on the other hand, is a term used to describe aircraft accidents that occur often enough, CFIT. Captain Robert Loft was flying an aircraft to Miami when one of the many indicator lights failed to turn on, causing him to lose concentration. They attempted to fix this fault with the help of the first officer, an aviation mechanic, and a flight engineer. The crew was so preoccupied with repairing the aircraft that they completely forgot about flying it. 99 persons were killed when the Boeing aircraft crashed into the Everglades. Multitasking without losing focus is very difficult. Humans can virtually never perform two tasks that demand attention at the same time. They have a tendency to flip back and forth, relapsing and forgetting what they were doing before, and it takes them longer to remember and realign. According to studies, using a smartphone while driving reduces a driver's ability to focus on his driving and react appropriately to traffic, increasing the chance of an accident. It is worth noting, however, that as technology advances, the likelihood of having an accident while chatting on a smartphone has decreased dramatically. Framing, timing, anchoring, and skimming are four major ways in which people's decisions are influenced. Researchers in the United Kingdom have discovered that the origin of wines purchased in a wine shop corresponds to the origin of the music played in the store. Customers purchase Italian wine when they hear Italian music, and French wine when they hear French music. This image illustrates the indisputable power of people's perceptions. The following four main variables influence decision-making. Framing. The way an issue is framed, or presented, has an impact on how individuals approach solving it. The success of a novel anti-cancer medication that had just been evaluated for usage was reported on the top page of the New York Times. Upon hearing the news, investors promptly reacted and contacted the appropriate contacts to discuss a potential business transaction. However, when the same news organization published identical information on page 8 28 months earlier, the investors did not react. The fact that the item appeared on the top page enticed investors who think that only the best offers make it to the front page. Top news attracts a lot of attention, which is why many people judge a story based on the headlines alone. Timing. People are more willing to accept risks when the repercussions are not immediate but will occur later. For instance, when some studies asked individuals what movie they wanted to watch in a week, the majority of them said intellectual films. They selected popular movies when asked what movie they wanted to see right away. This demonstrates that individuals are more ready to accept extremely large risks if the repercussions are not immediate. Anchoring. People often attach or put their answers to particular numbers in a variety of circumstances. Humans ignore mistakes on a page they're reading because they focus on the first few letters of a word and then fill in the remainder in their minds. Business transactions and purchases are good examples of anchoring. An item offered for $400 plus a $100 delivery charge will not attract as many buyers as an item sold for $500 with free shipping. Both products have the same price, yet consumers notice the difference since the prices have been anchored. Skimming. This occurs when individuals fail to see mistakes because they are not paying attention. People scan printed things a lot, particularly if they know what's within. They only see what they expect to see and disregard what they should be looking at. These four ways explain why people are always quick to make decisions. When you fail to look at things from a different or deeper perspective, you'll only see things others want you to see. It is difficult to eliminate bias and learn from errors if you are unaware that you have been prejudiced. Reno, Nevada lies on the western outskirts of San Diego, California. When you ask them where it is, they will almost always answer east. This is because, on the map, Reno, Nevada, seems to be more attractive if it is located to the east. This error occurs because individuals are naturally drawn to things that are beautiful and tidy. Curves grow more symmetrical, objects get more aligned, and lines become more symmetrical. The mind organizes facts in the brain in a hierarchical fashion, arranging them in a clean and orderly manner. Your memory and the information stored in your brain are affected by the kind of person you are. Because people tend to ignore information in an effort to inflate, exaggerate, and downplay what they've learned, you may have trouble remembering anything you've learned over time. Nurses at Cedars-Sinai Hospital in California delivered a pair of twins a 10,000-unit dosage of heparin instead of the prescribed 10-unit dose on November 17, 2007. They repeated their mistake the following day, not understanding their error. Fortunately for the nurses, the infants lived, but how could such a blunder occur in such a large hospital? The error occurred because there were no appropriate restrictions in place to prevent anything like this from happening. The nurses were confused since the labels for the 10,000-unit dosage and the 10-unit dose looked extremely similar. To avoid making similar mistakes, create a distinct feature that would help you differentiate between two similar things. Gender and overconfidence are two major reasons why people make mistakes. Overconfidence contributes to errors. Male-dominated sectors are assumed to have high production and performance levels. Women are more cautious than males because they take errors more seriously. Women hate making errors, which is why they avoid taking chances. To make up for their lack of confidence, men think they can afford to make more errors. People can only accomplish so many things at once. The more people do, the more chances for errors. No one will claim to be average, much alone below average if asked. According to a study by economist Stefano Della Vigna, individuals would deny being average if asked. Everyone is overconfident, except sad individuals, who tend to be realists. 7. Stefano. Many individuals don't understand their limitations, therefore they do things that waste their life. Overconfidence may lead to signing up for a gym membership when you don't have time. You need feedback on your actions to overcome overconfidence and discover your real talents. To get accurate feedback, you can take some clear steps. Thinking small. The smallest adjustment may often make the greatest impact on your life. Sometimes a small remedy may fix major errors. A simply typed prescription, for example, may save more than 7,000 fatalities caused by physicians' poor handwriting each year. Calibration. Calibration is a process that assesses both real and perceived skills. Calibration mistakes may result in significant losses. This is why, in order to determine your actual location, you must recalibrate at regular intervals. Thinking negatively. While it is essential to remain optimistic, it is equally necessary to hope for the best while planning for the worst. When you're having negative thoughts, don't simply let them take control of your mind. Instead, plan ahead for the worst-case situation. Letting your spouse proofread. You'll never be able to see everything from your own point of view. Request that your partner proofread for you so that they can spot the errors you missed while skimming. Getting some sleep. When you need to, relax and rest your body. When you're working under pressure or stress, you're going to make mistakes. Sleep deprivation may make you less productive and lead to errors. When you combine all the steps above with happiness, your creativity and productivity will improve massively, reducing your chances of making mistakes. Conclusion. The first step in rectifying a mistake is to acknowledge that a mistake has been committed in the first place. A large number of individuals are completely unaware of the errors they make, making it impossible for them to learn from their blunders. Mistakes are unavoidable in daily human existence, yet many of the mistakes that individuals make are preventable. In order to learn from errors, you must first understand the reasons why individuals make them in order to avoid making the same mistakes again in the future. Every individual makes mistakes from time to time. Even though it's almost impossible to avoid making mistakes, the difference between you and the typical person is that you shouldn't allow your mistakes to define who you are. Learning from errors is the most effective way of dealing with them. If you feel like you aren't doing enough, you should strive more, and if something isn't working out for you, you should know when to let it go and try something else. As previously said, errors are unavoidable and, to a great extent, uncontrolled. A great deal about yourself is determined by how you respond to your mistakes. Almost everyone is capable of retracing their steps so long as they are able to identify the areas in which they made errors. When you pay close attention to yourself, you will be able to identify the things you are doing incorrectly. Try this. Increase your level of happiness by engaging in activities that provide you pleasure. In order to determine whether or not you've made progress, keep track of your level of productivity while you're doing so.